That's so deceptive.
Zelf.
On the shelf.
Take one.
What are we doing today, Tanner?
Today we're gonna read a story. It's about all my favorite things. Jealousy, passion, castration.
That's like the archetypal story right there.
Yeah, the true hero's journey.
There are only 7 storylines in the world, that's one of them.
Let's just get right into it. This was posted on ex-Mormon Reddit. He's taken all this information from D. Michael Quinn's book, The Mormon Hierarchy, Extensions of Power, which really was a shelf-breaking book for me. I got 2 chapters into that book and I was like, oh, there's like no inspiration in the LDS Church. It's all just politics. So this is all from there. And if you've ever read a book by Michael Quinn, you see that it's like, the books are like this thick and half of it is just references. So he's like so well researched. So anyone who's like, oh, that's just hearsay, it's like, no.
And he was the historian excommunicated for writing true history, right?
Exactly. Michael Quinn got excommunicated with the September 6th in the 90s for publishing church history that later the church embraced and said, we've been teaching this all along.
It's not our fault you didn't see the 1951 Friend.
Yeah.
So we're going into this with me having basically no knowledge of this story, so I'm excited.
So buckle up, it is a doozy.
So we're actually going to read the story as told by this Reddit post, and then we're going to look at Fair Mormon's response to it.
Yeah, because it is
very exciting.
Disgusting.
Very exciting.
Okay. Do you want to start? You have such a great voice. You should probably just read the whole thing. People would probably rather hear that.
Let us know below. Okay, in the early spring of 1857, Warren Snow was bishop of the church at Manti, Sanpete County, Utah. Bishop Snow was in his 40s and already had several wives. But there was a fair young woman in the town that Snow also wanted for a wife. But the beautiful young girl told Snow that she was then engaged to a young man her same age, Thomas Lewis, a member of the church. Consequently, she would not marry the old bishop. Bishop Snow, in Joseph Smith fashion, insisted that it was the will of God that she should marry him instead of Lewis. But the girl continued obstinate. Oh, she's made a grave error.
Yeah, you never want to be obstinate in the presence of a man. The ward teachers visited her and advised her to marry Bishop Snow. Then the ward authorities called on the young man and directed him to give up the young woman. This he steadfastly refused to do. Lewis was promised church preferment, celestial rewards, and every other blessing they could think of, to no purpose. He remained true to his fiancée and said he would die before he would surrender his intended wife to the embraces of another.
That, in my book, is how you should handle another priesthood holder wanting to marry a woman.
You were allowed to take someone else's wife if you had more keys than them. Like Brigham Young openly taught that.
Yeah, but good for him.
Yeah. Way to be. Marriage really was instituted as a way for people in a cultural dominance hierarchy to keep women as a sexual commodity. Yeah. And they were traded by their families and their tribes, and it's just like, oh yes, you get to have this virgin, and you get to have sex with her all you want, and you can be unfaithful to her, but if she's unfaithful to you, dead. Yeah. And you watch like a documentary on baboons, and you're like, yeah, that's what baboons do. Like, of course, that's what we grew out of. But
and rape has just got to have been like an inherent part of that. I don't even think you'd get many men at all that would be okay with their wives saying no, because they're like, I paid for you, or like, you know what I mean? Besides being a religion which in many ways is just like self-improvement MLM, mixed with a little like gospel of prosperity thrown in there. Oh yeah. But Mormonism actually started out as like a sex MLM. The people at the highest levels of the dominance hierarchy gotta have free choice of their spouse, who was their property, who the leaders of the church said, I think no more of buying a cow than I think of taking on a new wife. That's how they viewed it. So, anyway, moving on. Then the bishop called Lewis to go on a mission to some distant locality so that he would have no trouble in effecting his purpose of forcing the girl to become another of his wives. But Lewis also refused to go on a mission. What an apostate. When that is done, he will not be liable to want the girl badly, and she will listen to reason when she knows that her lover is no longer a man. Who said that? The bishop. Oh. In May 1857, Bishop Warren S. Snow's counselor wrote that the 24-year-old Lewis has now gone crazy after being castrated by the bishop for an undisclosed sex crime. Wow. A month later, upon hearing the news of what Bishop Snow had done, church leader Brigham Young said, I failed to sustain him, even though Young's brother Joseph, a general authority, disapproved of the punishment. In July, Brigham Young wrote a reassuring letter to the bishop about this castration. Just let the matter drop and say no more about it, the LDS president advised, and soon it will die away among the people. It really did.
So, yeah, totally.
That plan worked out well until now.
Let's unpack that, because it kind of brushed over what happened, which is a bishop wanted to marry a girl. She said no, and then he organized a mob that castrated the guy.
Yes. That is what happened.
In the book I read it on, he doesn't mention it here, I think it's further documented in Quinn's book, is that not only did they castrate him, they nailed his testicles to the schoolhouse door so that it could be an example to those who question the priesthood.
God.
And Brigham Young says,
I sustain him.
Raise your arm to the square.
I hate when they brush over a castration. Okay, so that seems like a pretty damning story, because President Young knew of the castration. It wasn't like he sustained the man, but like there was not necessarily evidence that he knew. Like he definitely knew. A man was definitely castrated by a bishop.
And then he ended up going insane.
As you would. Yeah. And I'm just wondering how Fair Mormon is gonna counter that.
I'm sure it'll be even-handed and empathetic.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's just, it's disgusting. You're gonna vomit.
Fair Mormon, question. Quick question for you. Did Bishop Warren S. Snow forcibly castrate 24-year-old Thomas Lewis?
Bishop Warren S. Snow forcibly castrated 24-year-old Thomas Lewis.
They've just come out and said it.
There it is.
The popular story is that Lewis's alleged crime was wanting to marry a young woman that was desired by an older man as a plural wife. Okay, so that older man was a bishop.
And they're already setting it up like the anti-Mormons.
The popular story, yeah. It is claimed that Brigham Young wrote in a letter, because I'm sure that the church doesn't have that letter, wrote in a letter his approval after the fact in 1857. The full story gives a somewhat different picture of these events. Oh, I fucking knew it.
Lewis was not attacked simply for desiring a marriage. Had it been that alone, they would have just broke his thumb or something. Samuel Pitchfork noted that the attack occurred at night as Lewis was being transported to the penitentiary for an unspecified crime. Pitchfork was the clerk of the Nephi ward who knew Bishop Snow well and wrote his account very shortly after the incident. John A. Peterson, in his December 1985 master's thesis, notes that the sermons delivered in the Manti ward, the spirit of the times, the form of punishment itself, and the record of Brigham Young's reaction to it make it clear that Lewis had committed a sexual crime. So what they're saying is, due to how severe it is and the fact that Brigham Young sustained it, therefore we can only assume that he deserved it.
They're trying to because if you're an active Mormon, you'll read this and you're going to assume the absolute worst about this man.
Yeah, he was a bad person.
He was
being taken to jail, so the fact that the mob intervened in the course of justice to castrate him.
Well, I'd read this.
He had it coming.
I'd read this and be like, he'd raped someone. Or that would be my putting my Mormon hat on. That's what I would think based on the way this is written, like an unspecified crime, a sexual crime, and I'd be like, well, if it's like a rapist or a child molester, then yeah, cut off their balls. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and you can't forget that at this time there was no distinction between the secular government and the religious government. Like they were the same thing. Yeah, Brigham Young was governor and president of the church.
So they could have ordered him to the penitentiary.
Yeah, then his crime was he didn't submit to the bishop.
Yeah, and so they obviously ordered him to go to the penitentiary so that they could then plan to attack him on the way. Oh my god, this is gross. According to his biographer, Snow's life and experience had given him a violent and vengeful worldview, which helps in understanding his motivation to attack and maim Lewis.
Not his fault.
Federal marshals and judges were aware of the Lewis incident and sought Snow's capture. However, they were eventually instructed by political leaders in Washington to let the matter drop. It was a Gentile political decision not to prosecute Snow for his actions.
No,
what the fuck?
Because U.S. Marshals didn't send a 3-month wagon train across barren country in order to bring justice to one person when they had a well-established local judicial system that could take care of it, but decided not to. Therefore, it's the Gentiles' fault for not taking care of this.
So what?
Fair Mormon
This is the worst one ever.
No, truly, you have no conscience.
Okay, so basically what they're saying...
You're sick.
Essentially what they're saying is well, it wasn't that bad that it happened because he was a sick sexual predator or something. Have they mentioned that Brigham sustained him yet? They haven't mentioned that, have they?
Yeah.
Given that in the 19th century there was a common tendency for frontier justice to be carried out extra legally, especially in the case of sexual crimes, its occurrence in areas far from central church control is not particularly surprising. Castrated males were guilty of sexual assault or incest, not for competing for a woman's affections.
Fuck you guys!
And if something was a precedent, then that meant that no one ever went against it. And if there's evidence that they did, that must be wrong.
And remember that Brigham Young was teaching that it's appropriate to kill people who break their covenants, one of which is obey your fucking leaders all the time.
Well, and Brigham Young taught if you can take a man's wife if you have more priesthood keys. I'm sure that extended through to this.
Disobedience is apostasy, and apostasy is punishable by death or violence.
These events occurred during the Mormon Reformation, when inflammatory rhetoric called for harsh punishment for sin and crime. Oh, who made that inflammatory rhetoric? Was it
the prophet of the church?
The president of the church.
The Quorum of the 12 Apostles? Various members of the Quorum were teaching that?
For Brigham, the time for the actual implementation of such punishment had not yet actually arrived, and was primarily hyperbole designed to stir a sinful population to improvement. How do you know that? What are they deducing that from? I guarantee
Especially
Brigham Young would agree
considered
with
they
that.
actually killed people. It's not like it hadn't shown. They had actually performed blood atonement.
Okay,
on
they
people.
said some listeners, like Snow, took things literally, and that's where they end it. They don't even mention the fact that Brigham Young said, I sustain him after hearing about the incident. It doesn't matter what argument you have in the rest of it. They've deliberately left out the fact that Brigham Young sustained him after finding this out and said, oh, I'll just blow over.
And it's like, some listeners, like Snow, took the prophet's word as literal truth.
Just
as
like
if that's the worst thing you could do to follow the prophet. As if that's not the thing that you're taught every Sunday of your life is to obey with exactness. That's what Mormons are taught. And it's here, it's like, oh, well, we can't blame him if, you know, he took Brigham Young's instruction to kill people who disobey you literally.
Despite the fact that Brigham was always like, every word I say is scripture. God, this is some high quality gaslighting and also low quality gaslighting.
Yeah.
Like Thomas Lewis, they didn't even have the balls to mention that Brigham sustained him, because they knew if that came up, there's like no backing out of that. So they literally just purposefully moved one of the most damning parts of the story, which is that the president of the church sustained this man. They also say at the beginning, the popular story is that Lewis's alleged crime was wanting to marry a young woman that was desired by an older man as a plural wife. They didn't even mention the fact that the bishop was the one that wanted the man for a plural wife. That's so deceptive. Bishop Warren Snow forcibly castrated. So they're trying to imply that the bishop is just some noble guy that comes along and is like, you've raped someone or whatever, so I'm going to castrate you. They mention the fact that a man wanted to marry this woman and don't even say it was Bishop Snow. Like, that is so deceptive. I can't believe that. So they've deliberately missed out the fact that the bishop was the one that wanted the wife. They've deliberately missed out that Brigham sustained it. Like, how do the people at Fair Mormon like not know that they don't have a leg to stand on when they're having to purposefully omit stuff? I bet the people that wrote this, for example, probably thought maybe for whatever reason they believe that at the end of the day it's all true, but they have, you know, some kind of twisted narrative. But they think it's like, this is what they have to do for like the lesser people that wouldn't be able to handle the truth. God.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they call it inoculation, right? Which is weird to think about, because inoculation, you put a small bit of the germ in so that your body gets used to fighting it. And they look at the truth as a disease, like that's their metaphor, is that people might catch too much truth.
And it makes me so annoyed, because they always talk about how like ex-Mormons and anti-Mormons will just take something true and then they'll distort it. And it's like, this is like the most obvious example of that possible.
And this is a pretty extreme example, but it's a good one because it makes you realize how like truly gaslighting the nature of the church is, because in order to believe this and to justify it, you can't be operating rationally. It's like an insane form of thinking. And so in order to get, no wonder like leaving religion is so hard, because you've been treated like an insane person your whole life, and all of a sudden you're understanding what it means to be sane, and you're like, holy shit, I've been insane my whole life.
And it is true, when you leave the church or when you interact with like Mormon apologists are famous for just gaslighting you, aren't they? Like totally just trying to make you think that you're crazy because you believe something that any logical person would believe based on the evidence available. That's,
in the same way that they gaslight this guy. Like,
yeah.
Oh, he was being carried to the penitentiary. Therefore, he was a rascal who deserved castration. That's just how it was back in the day. We don't expect the church to act any better than the Wild West cow. Like, it's crazy because that's the selling point of the church, right? Is that you're a step above everyone else. You've got the gospel, therefore you're better than the world. And yet, anytime the church acts worse than the people of its generation, it's like, well, they can't be expected to act like, prophets.
Also, where the fuck is Jesus? Like the whole, like, he was without sin, cast the first stone, castrate the first man. Also, I love how they say castrated males were guilty of sexual assault or incest, not for competing for a woman's affections. Like, that means nothing. Like, that sentence means nothing. That's like me saying, like,
witches were only drowned for being witches.
This was seriously so fun. I love now being able to look at all the Fair Mormon stuff. Now that I'm so emotionally removed from it, and I'm just like, oh, that's batshit crazy. It's really fun. The Fair Mormon part was my favorite part.
Yeah, because
it's just like, oh yeah,
it's like shooting fish in a barrel.
Yeah, it makes you realize, like, I could just like sit back and relax. This thing's gonna self-destruct on its own. I don't need to do anything.
Apologists
this is just for fun.
are doing more than anybody else to take people out of the church.
Honestly,
they took me out of the church. Truly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fair Mormon. If you guys liked this kind of story and exposition, I really liked it. It was really fun. It's kind of murder mystery, true crime.
Yeah.
Vibe. And the Mormon history underbelly is full of this kind of shit.
If you want to support us to make more content, then we're going to leave our Patreon link down below. Also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We have an Instagram now, for those of you who don't know. It's okay.
Alright.
Thumbnail.
Bye.